What if their retreat is not a rejection of you, but a direct response to the overwhelming power of their own feelings? Let's deconstruct a truth most people miss when an avoidant partner grows distant. That silence you receive is rarely about a lack of feeling. It's a profound fear of the feeling itself. Your natural instinct is to see their withdrawal as a sign you don't matter. But the reality is far more complex. For a person wired for self-protection, deep affection doesn't signal joy. It triggers an internal emergency. Most hearts express love through connection, through words and closeness. Yet for someone with an avoidant pattern, genuine care often manifests first as a kind of terror. This doesn't make the emotion less real. It means the potential intimacy is so potent, it's perceived by their nervous system as a genuine threat to survival. This is the depth of their defense. They have spent a lifetime building an identity on a single core belief, that to rely on another is to risk losing the self. So when a real bond begins to form, it's not a celebration, it's a crisis. They aren't pulling away because they feel nothing. They are pulling away because they feel everything all at once and possess no internal blueprint for how to process it safely. Their foundational fear is of being engulfed, of being consumed by the needs of another until their own identity vanishes. The walls they built aren't to keep you out, they are to keep a version of themselves intact. They don't just fear your love, they fear what loving you might require them to become. The moment they notice they need you, that their peace is tied to your presence, their entire sense of independent self shudders. And that illusion of total autonomy is their psychological oxygen. Love in this light feels like suffocation. So what happens? They perform a tactical retreat. They vanish emotionally. This shutdown isn't a weapon aimed at you. It's a desperate scramble to regain control over a self that feels like it's dissolving. Their silence is a survival mechanism. And here's the critical insight you must grasp, that silence isn't just directed at you. Their silence is the sound of a soul at war with its own deepest need. They are trying to quiet the internal voice that whispers of connection. To acknowledge that voice would mean facing risk, embracing vulnerability, and initiating change. The three things their wiring is designed to avoid at all costs. This is where most observers misinterpret the data. They assume distance signals apathy, but in the psychology of avoidance, distance is the only coping mechanism for an overwhelming flood of attachment. Think about that. The very connection you long to give is the very thing that overwhelms their system. They don't run because they want less of you. They run because they have no idea how to contain the enormity of what they're starting to feel for you. Let's be unequivocal. This explanation is not an excuse for emotional neglect. It does not mean you tolerate intermittent reinforcement or manipulation. Understanding the why is not for their benefit, but for yours. So you stop internalizing their withdrawal as a referendum on your worth. Their silence is not your failure. It is a broadcast of their inner chaos. In a twisted, paradoxical way, that silence can be their most authentic, if broken, love language. It's backward, it's painful, but it's real. Because in their world, creating space isn't about forgetting you. It's a frantic attempt to hold you in their mind without allowing you to dismantle the fragile emotional order they've depended on for survival. So when the quiet descends, shift your question. Don't ask, why won't they speak? Instead, ask, what terrifying feeling are they trying not to feel? If their silence is the shield, then the genuine love you offer is the one force capable of piercing it. Let that truth anchor you. Now let's examine those small confusing gestures, the random hello text out of the blue, the passive like on your social media, observing your life from a digital distance without direct engagement. Most dismiss these as meaningless, as accidental blips. But what if they are not accidents at all? What if each one is a covert distress signal from someone terrified of speaking in full sentences? Here is the raw reality. When an avoidant person checks in without truly connecting, they are not reaching out because they are ready to commit. They are reaching out because they are utterly unable to fully detach. That distinction is everything. They are attempting to brush against your world without the risk of holding you, to stay close enough to soothe their own fear of abandonment, yet remain far enough away to avoid their greater fear of engulfment. It is a survival play disguised as casual indifference. You must comprehend how vulnerability feels to a psyche built on self-reliance. True intimacy feels like standing exposed on an open plain with no cover, no defenses, no retreat plan. So they substitute true closeness with mere proximity. They replace conversation with silent observational presence. They stay near enough to monitor, but not near enough to be truly seen. This is the classic push-pull dynamic in action. What you witness isn't confusion, it is a live internal conflict, a battle between a deep human need to connect and a primal reflex to protect. That midnight hay is not just a probe into your state, it's a test of their own capacity. Can I handle contact right now? Can I manage my emotions if I engage? Can I be near their energy without losing my own shape again? It is emotional breadcrumbing, certainly, but the intent is not always malicious. Often, it is the only relational strategy their history has taught them. Many were conditioned, often in childhood, to believe that direct emotional expression leads to pain or dismissal, so they learned to encode their feelings in safer, smaller gestures. A comment, an emoji, a brief late-night message, these are not empty actions, they are emotional Morse code. The translation, I miss you, I think of you, but I cannot say it because giving it voice makes it terrifyingly real, and real is the very territory their entire being is organized to avoid. Here is where we dive deeper. An avoidant's core terror isn't just intimacy, it's dependency. The instant they realize your presence affects their mood, their focus, their core identity, pure panic sets in. That is the moment they go dark, and that is precisely why the breadcrumbs appear afterward. Because cutting you out of their life completely is an unbearable loneliness. But stepping back into a full open relationship is an overwhelming prospect. So they chart a middle course. Unspoken connections, silent observances, a ghostly presence in your orbit. And most people catastrophically misread this as indifference. But genuine indifference doesn't watch your stories at 2 a.m. Indifference doesn't resurface after weeks of silence. Indifference doesn't maintain invisible psychic ties. This is not detachment. This is attachment, fiercely suppressed. It's an entirely different emotional climate. They care. They have simply buried that care beneath layers of fear, self-preservation, and survival instinct. What appears casual to you is meticulously calculated by them. What looks like weakness is, in their mind, a necessary strategy. They are attempting to control love by controlling the manner in which they engage with it. The profound irony? They lose control every single time they feel compelled to reach for you. So if they are checking in without connecting, know this with certainty. You remain firmly within their emotional orbit. You have not been forgotten. You have been compartmentalized. And that act of compartmentalization is not a rejection. It is a stark signal of how powerfully deep their feelings run. The question is no longer, are they thinking about me? The real pivotal question is, can they psychologically withstand what they feel when they do? Remember this. The avoidant doesn't reach out to rebuild a bridge. They reach out to remember what the bridge felt like. Have you witnessed the pattern where they seem most open and tender one day, only to become cold and distant the next? That sudden chill feels like a personal rebuke. Yet the paradox holds. Their retreat often occurs at the precise moment their own feelings have become undeniable. When an avoidant feels safe enough to momentarily lower their guard, their own nervous system may interpret that safety as a catastrophic loss of control. The emotional security you seek registers in them as a blaring alarm. Danger, true intimacy detected. Psychologists call this a deactivating strategy. It is an internal emergency brake wired directly into their relational framework. The moment their heart responds authentically to closeness, that brake slams on. They may pick a trivial argument, suddenly demand space, or bury themselves in work. These actions are not designed to punish you. They are attempts to regulate an internal panic attack you cannot see. On a philosophical level, they are defending the sovereignty of a self they believe is threatened by merger. Love, to them, threatens the borders of an identity they've spent years fortifying. Any sign that you, through your consistency, your warmth, your simple presence, might cross those borders triggers an existential defense. If we become a we, where does the I go? Now here is the counterintuitive key. If you were insignificant, they would not need such formidable defenses. An avoidant does not waste energy building walls against strangers. They only invest in armor where the stakes are primal, where attachment feels vital, where losing the other would feel like losing a part of their own atmosphere. Your closeness illuminates the very wounds that created their avoidance. Childhood moments where need met rejection, where vulnerability met ridicule, where dependency met abandonment. In the echo chamber of memory, their mind made a vow, never again. So when you step into the space those old echoes still haunt, the reflex is to push you out before perceived history can repeat. But there is another layer. This self-sabotage can also be an unconscious, brutal test. They are asking, will you still choose me if I am difficult? If I am inconsistent? If I make intimacy feel like labor instead of a gift? They don't say it, but they are searching for proof that your care is resilient enough to survive their internal chaos. The tragedy is that the test meant to confirm love often corrodes the very conditions love needs to grow. Yet if you can recognize the pattern, you can refuse the invitation to chaos without abandoning compassion. You hold your ground, calm, boundaried, present. You demonstrate what consistency looks like without demanding they surrender their autonomy. Notice the defining paradox. The closer you get to their heart, the faster they rebuild the wall. And that reconstruction is evidence you are getting close. Your presence is touching nerves no one else has reached. Yes, it is painful. Yes, it is disorienting, but understanding transforms that pain into crucial information. Now you can decode the retreat. My nearness just activated their emergency system. This is proof of depth, not deficiency. With that lens, you stop chasing and start observing with clarity. You allow the internal break to engage without personalizing the screech. You offer space without disappearing yourself. You model regulated intimacy, proximity without pressure. In that steady, regulated space, they have a chance, however slight, to learn that staying does not have to mean drowning. None of this suggests you tolerate chronic disrespect or emotional unavailability. Boundaries are the oxygen mask you secure on yourself first. But when the first cold front blows in immediately after a period of warmth, pause. Before you interpret it as a permanent winter, consider that what feels like rejection is often a nervous system's clumsy, frightened declaration. I feel too much. If you can meet that frightened declaration with steady, unwavering self-respect, you create the only environment where the relationship might possibly evolve beyond its foundational reflex. So, the next time they push away right after opening up, see it for what it likely is. Evidence that authentic care has breached their defenses and they are scrambling to find footing. Leave them wondering how you remained so calm in the storm, and watch as curiosity may begin its slow work of replacing fear. Let me pull back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood behaviors, the performance of forgetfulness. They may act as though your birthday slipped their mind, or they can't recall a song meaningful to your shared history. They give you a casual shrug, but behind that composed facade, their mind often maintains a private, high-resolution archive of you. An avoidant survival has long depended on hypervigilant pattern recognition, tracking moods, micro-expressions, and relational conditions because control is their primary currency. So while they offer a nonchalant demeanor, their subconscious is actively assembling a detailed map of your inner world. The way you smile when you're skeptical, the specific hour you usually stop texting, the color you wore on a significant day. Neurologically, this makes sense. Hypervigilance is a common feature of attachment wounding, a nervous system primed for potential abandonment scans for threat data like radar scans for storms. Every detail becomes critical intelligence. How did their tone shift? What was the look in their eyes? On the surface, cool and detached. Underneath, a full sensory recording. This is why months later they can quote an offhand remark you've forgotten or reference a minor goal you mentioned once. They did not forget. They filed it away under vital information. Philosophically, memory is how we assign meaning. To forget is to deprioritize. To remember, especially covertly, is to honor. An avoidance hidden remembrance reveals what they cannot admit. You occupy prioritized real estate in their inner world. But acknowledging that openly feels like violating their prime directive of self-protection through emotional minimalism, so they disguise memory as coincidence. Oh, I just happened to be near that cafe you like. Nonsense. That detour was planned. The gesture is their encrypted confession. I know you, I study you, you matter more than my fear can comfortably hold. This selective amnesia also serves a protective function. If they admit they remember, they become accountable for caring. Accountability invites obligation. An obligation feels like a trap to their autonomy. It feels safer to feign ignorance than to risk the vulnerability of responsibility. But watch what happens in a crisis. The moment you genuinely pull back your energy, they notice. Instantly, their nervous system hits the alarm, cataloging the date, the time, the shift in digital patterns. Why? Because your absence disrupts the precarious equilibrium they've engineered. You think they're indifferent, but internally, they are often scrambling. Why did they go quiet? What changed? Understanding this allows you to hold boundaries without buying into their facade. When they perform forgetfulness, don't argue. Simply note the incongruence. Hold your standard calmly. I believe you remember more than you're saying. When you're ready to be honest about that, we can talk. You neither shame their defense nor collude with the charade. That stance, steady, respectful, but unyielding, invites them into a different kind of relational honesty, one where memory can be shared instead of weaponized or hidden. Remember, the goal is not to extract constant proof of their recollection. It is to recognize that their memory already proves the depth of their attachment. Your task is to live anchored in your own truth, not to beg for validation of theirs. When you stop arguing over what they recall, you free yourself to observe how they use that memory, to connect or to control, to comfort or to evade. From that place of observation, you decide what you will allow. So the next time they act as if the past evaporated, trust what you sense. Their silence is often filled with unspoken details, their gaze is often a photographic lens, and their heart, though barricaded, is recording every meaningful moment you share. Here is the empowering takeaway. Their hidden memory of you is undeniable evidence of your impact. Use that knowledge to stand in your full stature, not to shrink or chase. Let's go to the layer almost everyone misses, the profound tension that builds in an avoidant person when they witness you genuinely rise. Not when you plead or pursue, but when you finally turn your energy inward. When you stop performing for their validation, stop orbiting their silence, and start expanding in your own sovereign life. That is the moment their entire emotional operating system short circuits. Most assume avoidants only value distance. But what truly destabilizes them is not distance itself. It is your independence, served without a side of resentment. It is when you detach with dignity, not drama. That's when the subconscious relational pattern they've relied on loses all structure. You are not punishing them. You are simply evolving beyond the reach of their old games. And here lies the supreme irony. The more emotionally self-contained and whole you become, the more they feel the palpable weight of what they are losing. Not because they've suddenly become available, but because for the first time, they are confronted by something that terrifies them more than intimacy: irrelevance. Understand this core distinction. Avoidants are not afraid of being alone. They are often masters of solitude. What they deeply fear is no longer mattering. You becoming genuinely self-sufficient challenges their internal narrative that says, I am safest when I am needed by no one and need no one. When you stop needing them to feel complete, they can no longer cast themselves in the familiar roles of reluctant hero or graceful escape artist. You have dismantled the entire psychological scaffolding their relational identity was built upon. This shift hits with force because it confronts their ego structure at its foundation. The avoidant ego thrives on controlling space, pace, and perception. They were comfortable within the old dynamic where you were anxious, seeking, always oriented toward a door they controlled. But now you're not at that door. You've walked into a room of your own creation and closed it behind you. That is when they may begin acting in ways that contradict everything they've previously professed. A vague, nostalgic message, a shared memory sent your way, a question that doesn't require an answer except it does, because it's not about the answer, it's a thermometer plunged into the situation. Am I still on their mind? Do I still affect their emotional weather? The more grounded and radiant you become, the more transparent their internal confusion becomes. They might try to reinitiate old patterns, spark small dramas, or act as if nothing has changed, but it has. You have. And that unsettles them profoundly because they did not expect you to grow without their participation, or worse, their permission. But your independence is not rebellion. It is a return to your natural center, and here is where you claim your greatest power: when you grow with love, not spite, when your silence is not a punishment, but a state of peace, when your transformation is not a strategy, but your living truth. That is when the avoidant begins to feel the gravitational shift in the universe you share. Not because you pushed them away, but because you pulled your anxious energy all the way back into yourself. And when they feel that absence, not the loud, angry absence of conflict, but the silent, solid absence of emotional dependency, it echoes in their psyche louder than any words you ever shouted. This is where true reflection can begin. Not in the heat of a fight, but in the quiet that follows, when your absence is not reactive, but radiant. You have moved forward. Now their inner world must recalibrate around that new reality. And whether they ever return or not, something has shifted permanently. They now hold the knowledge that you are not waiting. You are becoming. So the next time you believe they are unaffected by your growth, your boundaries, your newfound quiet confidence, think again. Avoidants don't chase validation, but they do feel the tectonic tremor when someone they care for stops orbiting their fear. They may never voice it, but a question begins to form in the depths. How did they outgrow the silence that still cages me? How did they heal the wound I still flee from? And here is what you must hold on to. Your healing doesn't just liberate you. It forces them, perhaps for the first time, to confront the very source of all their avoidance, their own unexamined self. There is something profoundly revealing about how an avoidant handles your raw, unfiltered emotional expression. The moment you cry in front of them, not as a tactic, but from a place of pure, unguarded truth, they may not rush to comfort you. In fact, they may freeze, go silent, or even physically withdraw. In that instant, most people make a devastating core-wounding assumption. My emotions were too much. I scared love away. But what if that reaction is not rejection? What if it is a form of reverence wrapped tightly in sheer panic? See, avoidants are often products of emotional deserts, environments where vulnerability was synonymous with danger, where feelings meant loss of control or were used as weapons. So when you break open in front of them, you aren't disgusting them. You are disorienting them completely. You have just entered sacred, terrifying territory for which they have no internal map. Strong emotions for them aren't just feelings. They are alarm bells. And tears, that is a 5-alarm fire they have no training to extinguish. But here is the twist most never see. If they didn't care, they wouldn't freeze. Indifference is capable of a polite, pat response. If you were just another person, your pain wouldn't destabilize them, but it does. Why? Because your vulnerability directly threatens the foundational wall their entire survival strategy is built upon. It communicates, I trust you enough to be completely real here. And to a soul steeped in emotional isolation, that level of trust feels both sacred and utterly paralyzing. There is a philosophical beauty here. What you perceive as weakness, crying, cracking open, revealing your tender core, is, in truth, an act of profound strength that most avoidants deeply admire but have no idea how to reciprocate. They don't reject your depth because it's unworthy. They retreat because it holds up a mirror, exposing their own profound lack of practice in the art of emotional presence. You have just shown them a dimension of love they have never allowed themselves to inhabit. You have become the mirror reflecting everything they've spent a lifetime avoiding within themselves. This is the moment you must rise above the instinct to shrink or apologize for your heart. Do not rush to manage their discomfort. You are not the problem. You are the invitation. An invitation for them to grow beyond the confines of avoidance, to witness what true emotional safety can look like. Even if it terrifies them, let your presence remain steady. Let your softness stand sovereign and unashamed. You are not having a meltdown. You are modeling a path out of emotional exile. What follows is rarely immediate. They might pull away, become hyper busy, pretend the moment never occurred. That is a trauma reflex, not proof of your unworthiness. In the quiet that follows, they will replay your vulnerability like a complex riddle. They will remember the tremor in your voice, the sincerity in your eyes, the fact that you didn't blame, you simply felt. And over time, that authentic memory can become more powerful than any curated, perfect moment you shared, precisely because it was real. You cannot force them to meet you in that raw space. That is not your burden, but you can and you must refuse to betray or diminish your own truth just to soothe their profound emotional inexperience. Your role is not to make your feelings more palatable for their comfort. It is to honor them with clarity and courage. Whether they choose to grow alongside you or walk away, your authenticity is never a mistake. It either deepens the connection into something real or reveals finally where the connection truly ends. So the next time your vulnerability is met with stunned silence, remember this: your emotions didn't scare them away. They shook something awake inside a sleeping fortress. And what they choose to do with that awakening, that is not your journey to carry. That is the beginning of their own. If this exploration resonated with you, help us reach others who need to hear it. Please take a second to like this video and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more insights into the human heart.